Shalom Aleichem, my dear brothers and sisters. It's been a while since my last video, and I saw that some of you guys were getting worried already as far as what happened, so I decided to make a video right now. And the reason I haven't been making videos because it was just several things. Sometimes I was busy, didn't have enough time. Sometimes I just wasn't inspired about a certain particular subject to talk about. But anyways, so in this video, I would like to discuss certain things that not many of you probably know in the what life is like in the religious Jewish neighborhoods in, let's say, Israel and Jerusalem and other places. And so some of the things I wanted to mention. So one thing, for example, is that there are certain streets in Jerusalem where men and women walk on opposite sides of the street, and this is not because there's some kind of a sign that says that, or some kind of a law that says to do that. No, the reason is really practical, because we have what's called a law, a rabbinical decree, a halacha, what we call it, a rabbinical decree that a man should not walk behind a woman. So, for example, if a man, let's say, is walking, and the woman is in front of him, the man should speed up, and catch up and go in front of the woman, so that he's not basically staring at a woman from behind. And this is we have this halacha, this law, and therefore, practically speaking, what ends up happening, if it's like a long street, let's say, and there's many people, obviously you're not going to be able to catch up to everybody and be the first one. That's so. What ended up happening is that there are neighborhoods where people try to observe this halacha, the men, and they all cross to the other side. And what ended up happening is that men are on one side and women are on the other side. So you see this in some religious neighborhoods. Another interesting thing is that in Israel there are certain bus routes that are inside the religious neighborhoods where men and women sit separately. The women are behind and the men are in front. So even if, let's say, a husband and a wife were to walk into a bus, they would actually sit separately. The wife would go behind, and the man would go in the front of the bus. And again, this is for modesty, so that people do not engage in conversation with each other's, strangers. And now, the reason why women are behind and men are in front, not because favoritism or anything like that, is because it's more comfortable. No, the reason because it's really more problematic for the men to look at women. When women see men, it's not really as problematic. It's more problematic for men to see women, and that's why they are in front, so that they don't look at women, from the back. And in fact, I'll be honest with you, I feel that this is really the proper path. Although some seculars may find this like as extreme and stuff like that, but this is, let's say I go into a bus with my wife. In fact, it's much more comfortable for me if my wife sits with women and I sit with men. Because it's normal for a man, for a husband to be, to look out for his wife. He doesn't want other men to look at her. In fact, that's by the way. In fact, one of the things I could never understand, how some men put the pictures of their wives on Facebook, for example. They're putting the pictures of their wives on Facebook as if they want other men to look at it, for example. I don't think this is the proper Jewish path. And even not just for Jews, for non-Jews as well, I think this is not the proper thing to do. To post pictures of your wife, on Facebook for others to see. If it's just family members that are part of your group, this is one thing. But when you have friends and cousins and other distant relatives, so in that case, anyway. So now another thing I wanted to mention, something that we have in Israel, in a religious neighborhood, and this was about maybe 12 years ago. So I'm not sure if it's still there. I assume it is, but there was a women-only mall in the city of Beitar, which is not far from Tel Aviv, and this is a religious Jewish city. and the mall is only for women, meaning only women are allowed to go inside the mall. And there is actually a security guard that sits in front and makes sure that no men go in. Now, little kids are allowed to, obviously, both male and female. So I think any boys that are above age 9 are not allowed to go in. But what's interesting is that this mall, it has a bet midrash right in front of the mall, which is like a study hall right in front of the mall, so that the husbands can drop off their wives, and while the wives are shopping, they can learn inside the bet midrash, learn religious books. It has a bunch of religious books there, and so this is interesting thing. Now, these kind of norms that I just listed to you, it doesn't bother the religious people. This is something obviously that they want, and this is something they like, and this is why it's there. And but for example, if let's say somebody walks in with a old grandma, like let's say a grandson walks in with an old grandma on the bus where the seating are separately, and he sits down with her because he needs to help her. Obviously, nobody's gonna say anything to him or to her, because this is obviously he has a good reason to sit next to her so that he can help her or whatever. But what sometimes happens, unfortunately, is that you have these journalists and these reporters, secular ones, that purposely sit in the opposite gender's place. So, for example, you have a female journalist that would specifically sit where men are supposed to sit on the bus, for example, and this would cause like a commotion. Somebody would tell her to please get up and all that, and then she would report it, and then this goes all over the news. And they do this on purpose in order to provoke the religious Jews, in order to provoke, for a response, and then they would, show this all over the country in order to basically show how primitive the Jews are, the religious Jews are. Or another example is, for example, we have certain neighborhoods in Israel where there's a dress code. There's a sign before you walk into the neighborhood. And the sign nicely asks for women to please be dressed properly when walking into this neighborhood. And it actually even gives details, how long the skirt should be, that the elbows should be covered, knees should be covered, the neck, not the neck, but anything below the neck shouldn't be showing. And basically, there's, these are just the norms that it politely, the sign asks them to do. So sometimes what ends up happening is that journalists and sometimes other seculars come in to provoke the religious Jews in order to get a response and then report it all over the country, how primitive the Jews are, the religious Jews are. But what ends up happening? That's what I think. That's what I feel ends up happening, is that actually it backlashes back at the seculars. And what ends up happening is that this becomes reported all over the, country, and even outside the country. You hear about these news sometimes even across the seas. And people find out more about Judaism, and they find out that, there's certain such, modesty laws that the Jews have. And any normal person would actually appreciate it. Even though the seculars are trying to, with all their might, they're trying to put down what they call the primitive religious Jewish norms. But what ends up happening is that people look at it and they're amazed, and they're like, wow, I didn't know that Jews have such nice and modest laws, and they're amazed by it, and people are more attracted. I'm talking about the secular Jews even. They're more attracted to the Jewish religion. And therefore a lot of people become religious. In fact, in Israel, the religious population is growing so fast that they're estimating that by, I think, 2050, they said that the majority of the country is going to be religious. They're going to be, majority of the voters are going to be religious Jews. And so this is actually backlashes back at, accomplishes the opposite effect of what the seculars are trying to do. And so this is what I wanted to mention today, and thank you for watching.